With that, I'd like to introduce Justice Elizabeth Clement, the president of the National Center for State Courts. Justice, welcome to Justice Speaks.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. You're a leader in the justice field, and you have done so many amazing things that I'm really excited to get into this interview. And I'd like to start by just asking you to tell us a little about yourself and how you got into law.
I'll start with how I got into law, and it's not the traditional path of I came from a family of lawyers. In fact, I didn't. My family were small business owners. I was the first in my family to go to college, although my grandmother went much later in life and as an adult learner and got her college degree. So it was really my passion and interest in history and government and civics that really led me to thinking, that this might be something that is a good fit for my interests, as well as being in a very large family, one of five children, and I served as the problem solver, often the mediator, and so that was kind of my natural skill sets, which I think really lends itself well to the legal field. One of my parents' really good friends was a lawyer, and I would talk with him about that, about his experience, and he later on in life was a longtime mentor of me throughout my entire career. So that's how I got into the law to begin with.
And how did you start your practice? I mean, what was your practice composed of before you got on the bench?
Yeah, so I worked in the Michigan Senate when I graduated from high school and I'm sorry, from college. And I decided that I wanted to go back to law school. I knew that I did. I wanted a little bit of a work experience first, which I highly recommend to anyone thinking about pursuing law school, is to get out and get some real life experience. And I always had in my mind that I was going to go back to state government. But when I was in law school, I had a tremendous professor that introduced me to family law and the importance of helping families as they struggled with very difficult times, right? Whether that's child custody, adoption, divorce, child welfare issues, juvenile law issues,
Probably the most difficult job for a judge out there.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's such a need. And I felt called to be able to really understand what people are going through and to serve in that way. So I was in private practice when I first was licensed as an attorney, primarily in family law, although I did some criminal law as it related to the experiences that my clients were having, as well as some probate and estate planning. After about 5 years, family law is a very difficult area to practice in. It's a
Yes.
very difficult area to be a judge of. I wanted to see if I could make a broader impact with policy and with the law in general. And so I left private practice and I went to work in the Michigan Senate as an attorney and a policy advisor. I wore a couple different hats in my time in the Michigan Senate. And then I went to work for the governor in the executive branch. Again, in the 7 years that I worked for the governor, I wore several different hats. I came in as a deputy legal counsel, took over as the deputy chief of staff and cabinet secretary, and then finished my time in the governor's office as the chief legal counsel before I was appointed to the Michigan Supreme Court in 2017. So I brought with me to the court experience in not just private practice, but really the type of private practice that impacts people and what impacts their lives in a really tremendous way, as well as experience in the other branches of government. And as a lawyer and as a policy advisor in a lot of ways. So I brought all of that with me to the court, and was able to take all of my passions that have really threaded throughout my entire career. That's children and families and access to justice, and I was able to do that as a justice on the Supreme Court, and even more so when I became Chief Justice.
I'd like to talk about that just a bit. You were a member of the Supreme Court, and how does one become Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court?
So in Michigan, and it's different in every state, but in Michigan, it is a position that is selected by your peers. So the seven members of the court make that selection. I was selected by my peers unanimously. I was selected three times, although as you know, and the listeners will understand, I left after my third time being selected to the court to pursue my current passion at the National Center for State Courts.
Well, before we turn to the National Center, you received the American Judges Association's Harold Freilich Judicial Courage Award. Can you tell us about how the circumstances that led up to that?
I can. A little insight into me. I do not like to talk about myself. It was a complete honor to receive that award. I was nominated by my dear friend and colleague. So the circumstances that led to that was I was appointed to the Michigan Supreme Court in November of 2017. Not only did I have to start a brand new job and learn the job, but I also had to run for statewide election. I was up for election in 2018, less than 12 months after my appointment. So as I'm learning my job and the cases are coming in, I'm traveling around the state. And we had a case that came before us regarding redistricting and gerrymandering, and whether or not a proposal to take the decision making of redistricting from the legislature and give it to an independent body, whether that question could go on the ballot. And that case came before the Supreme Court. There was a lot of political interest in that case. And a lot of political desire. I mentioned that I worked in the other branches of government. What I did mention is that was with the Republican majority Senate and for a Republican governor. So I think there was an expectation that I would, that my decision in that case would align with what those interests were. I applied the law as I believed it to be written, and that I believed that it should be applied, and that was contrary to what many people wanted to see. Many people being this political interest.
You did that at a time when you were up for nomination.
It was immediately before that the decision came out, just a few weeks before. Which is a whole conversation about the nomination process and Supreme Court races.
I'm not a fan of the Michigan Supreme Court nomination process. That said, it is justices are nominated at party conventions, and they run non-politically, and if you will,
nonpartisan.
They're nonpartisan races, and yet there's an underlying tension in that. And your party had taken a fairly strong position against the position you ultimately supported. And then you went into that nominating convention, and I watched that. It took courage. This wasn't an easy thing to do. You had to do the right thing for the right reason. And I was delighted when the nomination came in.
Yeah. I understand that judges across the country in every court and have to be courageous. For me, what it comes down to was this is one of the most important jobs in Michigan law, in Michigan jurisprudence, and I only wanted that job if I could do it the right way. And the right way was making a decision on a case regardless of any outside positions, pressure, influence, In my case, before the decision even came out, information was leaked from inside, indicating what my vote would be. And I was contacted and told I would lose all support for my campaign, that I would lose all of the staff that I had working on my campaign, and that I would be blocked in a number of ways, both at the convention and then afterwards for the campaign. And I understood all of that going into that final decision for the case. And it did not matter to me. I only wanted to do the job if I could do it the right way. And I think it was important to message that to the public as well as to the bench and bar. I received so much support from judges across Michigan that said, thank you. This is what we do every day. And it's hard for you to do that this year, right? But the fact that you've done it helps the public understand that we are a non-political branch for a reason, and we have to maintain that. And so it was a very difficult time. The convention was hard. My family was there with me afterwards. My husband said it was his first convention, and he said, "I don't ever want to go back to one of these." And I said, "Don't worry, I don't think we're going to be invited back." So, and then I was the only individual that had been nominated at the Republican convention that actually won statewide election that year. I was the only successful candidate.
As a resident of Michigan, I had an opportunity to observe the campaign, and you and I have several mutual friends and acquaintances, and it was a delight to watch that campaign and to see somebody who displays the courage to do what they perceive to be the right thing benefit from that decision rather than suffer, as sometimes does happen.
Thank
So
you.
it was a real pleasure. As the guy who handled the award and created it, I was delighted that you got it.
Thank you so much.
And so let's leave that now because I'm embarrassing you. And talk about you were a pinnacle of legal power in the United States. You were one of the few people who could decide cases and be basically that was the end of it. And you decided you wanted to do something different. How did you come to that decision?
So here's how this transpired. As I said, being a justice on the Michigan Supreme Court and being the Chief Justice was an absolute humbling experience and probably the biggest honor for an attorney in Michigan. And I loved the job. I loved my colleagues. I loved working with an appellate court where we all had to work together and we had to work with tremendous staff. When I took over as chief, that it's like having two jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're hearing cases just like all of your colleagues, but you're also taking on a lot of the administrative duties, not just for the Supreme Court, but for all of the courts in Michigan.
Right.
And I loved it. It really, my skill set throughout my career and the various jobs that I had, especially as the governor's deputy chief of staff and cabinet secretary, I loved solving problems. I loved saying, what's not working and how can we help make it better? And so wearing both hats, I loved the administrative work that I was able to do. And it's interesting. So last fall, I had a new class of law clerks come in. And I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna, maybe the best group of law clerks that I'd ever had, that all came in at one time. And they were so curious and they were so bright and they were so just in love with the job. And I noticed in myself that I had less of that, right? I had less of that interest and that passion that I had for years. But what I did have is that passion and that interest on the administrative side. And so when I recognize that in myself, I think it's important to say, is this an opportunity to allow, someone else to come in and do this job? It's hard to step away, but is it time for someone else to be the chief? Is it time for someone else to be on the Michigan Supreme Court and bring that excitement and that curiosity to the court? And so I started thinking about that. And then this position at the National Center became an opportunity. And I have said repeatedly, it's the only thing that I would have left the court before the end of my term to do. It was something that I knew was only going to come up once in my career,
Yes.
and I was not going to miss that opportunity.
And so now you're president of the National Center for State Courts. Um, how is it different? And how are you dealing with the transition?
So it's different in a lot of ways, and it's also similar in a lot of ways. It's a lot of the administrative work that I just spoke of that I love doing. Where it's different is, although I work with the National Center Board of Directors, as well as the Conference of Chief Justices Board of Directors and the Conference of State Court Administrators Board of Directors. I'm the CEO and president. I have a team, a tremendous team that helps support me.
Yeah,
But unlike the court, where though I was the chief, it was a court of seven that we had to get to four votes, right? I
yes,
couldn't just do anything I wanted as chief or as a justice without working with my colleagues.
right.
I guess I could have, but I probably wouldn't have been elected the second or third time as chief if I took that approach.
There
And
have
so,
been justices of the Michigan Supreme Court that had that experience. So,
right,
yes, I
right.
understand.
And I am a very collaborative person, and so while that the leadership role looks different, I still bring that collaborative spirit and that approach to leadership because my view is I have a team around me, a leadership team that has experience, that has expertise, that has creativity, and they bring something to the table. I can't do it all. I'm not good at everything, and that's why I have really talented people to help me as we're supporting the work and the mission of the National Center. So it's different in that way, although there's because of my approach to leadership, I think there's still a lot of similarities. The
Okay.
hardest thing has been I have been traveling nonstop almost every single week, although I did have the week of Thanksgiving that I was able to be home with my family. It's important for me to get out and meet with all of the courts, all of the associations that are so integral to the work that judges and court staff do, and integral to the work that the National Center does.
Hmm.
And so, working and traveling. I'm a lot older than I was the last time I had a really important new job, and I feel that a little bit. It's not, it's not as easy to bounce back every morning after working long hours. So.
But the role of the National Center is so important. The landscape for judges is changing. It's shifting. It's shifting technologically. It's shifting socially. It's shifting politically. Um, what challenges do you see for state courts over the next 10 years, and how is the National Center preparing to help them?
So you touched on the things that are what I am thinking about on a regular basis. So when I was chief and leaving that position, and even now, I heard from so many judges that talked about how different the job was and what the expectation of the job was. Some in a positive way, right? Where, people that had the experience 30 years ago and enjoyed that they could be more of a problem solver, whether that was through problem solving courts, or community engagement, right? That they were able to find a way to really feel like they could give back, and be connected with their communities in a different way. But some of the changes have also been incredibly challenging. Political challenges, and even setting aside politics, the lack of understanding of what the role of the judiciary
Yes.
is very concerning. It should be concerning not just to attorneys and to judges. It should be concerning to the public at large that people don't understand the three branches of government, and that two of the branches are intended to be political and to have that back and forth, right?
Yes.
Maybe not to the level that we see today, but that back and forth is what helps drive, policy decisions, and it helps what drive responding to what the public wants. The judiciary should not be responding in that way for judicial cases and making decisions. They can respond if the public says, we want more access to the courts, access to justice. We want more transparency. That we absolutely should be responding to, but not the changing, political landscape or the changing expectations from the public. And what comes to mind is the number of judges that have told me, their concern for not only their safety, but the safety of their families, the safety of their court staff, who have made a decision to work in this area and serve the public and deserve to be just as safe at their job as others are working in a different field, as well as concern for the safety of the public.
Right.
And so when I hear that from judges, to me, that it is the bigger picture of understanding the importance of the rule of law, respecting our democracy and our republic, and what is at the core, and that is a respect for the role of the judiciary, and we've lost that, and we need to be focused on that, because all those other pieces, right? Access to justice, technology changes, artificial intelligence, those are all pieces that if we don't have a strong judiciary that the public respects the rule of law and understands what their job is, those other pieces are they can't be used as tools to help, and in fact they could just be further eroded, no matter how much effort we put into them, if the foundation is not strong.
What a wonderful description. You really do express the need we all should have to have an independent judiciary. And I liked how you said that. But you do more than that at the National Center. You've been a leader in technology, and as it applies to the court for many decades. That conference that you put on annually about it, and you've now taken that into the next step of artificial intelligence. So I want to ask you about how you see the impact of artificial intelligence from the standpoint of the center.
So I appreciate your kind comments. The National Center has been a leader in so many things for decades. That is the purpose of the National Center, is to be innovative and to be leading in all of these areas. And artificial intelligence is no exception. I think that the National Center has done a tremendous job taking on that leadership role. We hear from other judicial associations and other court associations that they look to us and they're following our lead, so that they don't have to duplicate efforts, right? They don't have to redouble what we're doing. And so the impact that we have seen is greater efficiencies, but we're also looking at concerns about fairness and transparency.
Yes.
The reality is that we need to persuade the public that AI will help us do our work better. There are so many people that are concerned about artificial intelligence in the courts, more so than they are enthusiastic about it, from the polling that we did in 2025. And the National Center can do a lot of work, and we are. Everywhere I go, I talk about artificial intelligence and where we can use it as a tool to help the judiciary. And we can use it in tremendous ways. And I think folks think of, are you going to use artificial intelligence to decide cases? That is not the conversation that is taking place at all. We're talking about, can we use artificial intelligence to help us with the processes, right, of how cases come through the court, how communication is made to the public. Helping with, a great example is those typical roles that from being in Michigan, that can slow down the process and can impact the public's confidence in the system, whether that is how quickly they can get a court hearing, whether or not they can order transcripts because there's a backlog in having them processed. Interpreters, right? We do not have enough interpreters. In addition to that, we don't have enough lawyers, and I am guessing that we are never going to have enough lawyers to serve the needs of the public, and it's usually in cases where and in rural areas where there's just not enough attorneys, and so we can use AI to help in some of those ways to give some direction to the public and how to access the courts. In addition to that, I think that the public is going to use AI, and we are already seeing an uptick in cases. And I think we're going to see that really jump up where folks are using AI and filing with the courts. We can use AI to respond to that, right? To help us triage those cases and be able to handle that overload of cases that is very likely coming.
Well, I've talked to some judges, friends of mine, who keep saying, no, I'm never going to use AI. They don't realize they already are.
Right.
They're using it with pre-sentence reports. They're using it with bond reports. It's around them already. Attorneys are filing briefs using AI, some of which are hallucinating, as they say, and they're citing cases that don't exist. And some federal
But
judges have been caught
they have.
issuing opinions that had hallucinations in them too. It's already here. It's already affecting us. I think we need to educate people, which is why it's so great that you guys have taken a leadership role in this.
Well, and we can, you've cited some really good examples. When folks say, well, I'm not going to use it, what better way to use it than to help identify when there's a hallucination? And there are
Right.
tools out there, and they just keep getting better and better every day. The other thing that I think we need to be really thoughtful of is not just in the judiciary and legal profession, we're going to see AI replacing people. I would rather get ahead of that now and say, where do we see AI playing a role in the processes and in the staffing and all of that, so that we can recruit people and retrain people to do the jobs in the judiciary or in the legal profession that are going to exist in 5 years or in 10 years. So we have an opportunity to get ahead of that instead of responding to it and saying, well, we buried our head in the sand. We didn't want to deal with AI, and here we are. And now, we've lost staff, or we can't recruit people because they don't have the skills to do this. And so we have to lean into it, and we have to educate people.
Speaking of that, that talks about leadership. That's what you're talking about, how you lead people. What is the most important factor that you think of when you think about judicial leadership?
It's hard to pick the most important.
Well, then pick 5 or 6. I don't care.
Okay. This is what I say when I talk to high school students that are thinking about college students that are thinking about graduate school, new lawyers, and so many people that I have talked to over the years that have wanted to become judges. I think the most important skill that you need, and there's a lot of important ones, right? We've talked about courage. We've talked about curiosity. I think the most important skill is truly being able to listen. I think that a lot of people want to talk. They want to share their opinion, their thoughts. And if people could learn to listen and understand the position, the argument, the concerns, the fears, and actually be processing that before they respond to something, I think we could work through a lot of the divisiveness and divide that we have in the world right now. I know that I go out of my way to talk to folks that I think have very different opinion on a particular issue than I do. And I ask them to explain it. I ask them to talk to me about it. And I don't fight with them. I listen, I try to validate and understand because more times than not, there's a lot that we agree on. And when you can truly listen to someone and find those pieces that you can agree on, you can move forward as partners and together and get further along than if you are not able to listen and to work with others.
I think you're talking about what are the core elements of procedural fairness or procedural justice, as some call it. And having a judge that listens and knowing that the judge is listening and is giving you a fair opportunity really improves the view of the justice system.
Absolutely. I mean, we've done polling and surveys in Michigan of individuals that are accessing the court system, and we've done it from through the National Center as well. And it was so incredibly impressive to me to see the results where we would ask individuals about their experience at the court, and we would ask them whether or not they had won or lost the case that was before the judge or the magistrate. And even when folks lost, if they felt that they were treated with respect, that they were listened to, and they were given a fair shot, their rating and their experience was so much higher
Yes.
than in a court where they felt like they hadn't been listened to and hadn't been given a fair shot. And so that's what judges, I mean, yes, they have to decide cases, but what better metric than knowing that even someone that is not happy with your decision felt that they had a fair shot. I mean, what better metric than that?
When you decide a case against someone and it improves their view of the justice system, that's the core of procedural fairness.
That's a much better way of stating it. I'm going to remember that.
Listen, let's go to the last question I have for you, which is what legacy do you hope to leave at the National Center? And what would you like the future generation of judges and court administrators to do to carry forward whatever that vision is?
So I think what I have shared since coming into this role is that judges, as well as attorneys and court staff and state court administrators, that we need to have a judiciary that is truly independent, and it takes every one of us, and it takes it takes the bar, right? Attorneys stepping up and defending judicial independence and the rule of law, and I think even more importantly that we are accountable. We are accountable to the rule of law and the Constitution and the public, and not political or special interest groups. And what we can do at the state court level is so important because I don't know what the current percentage is. It's 98 or 99% of cases come through the state courts.
Yeah.
This is where judges and court staff are interacting with the communities and the public at the most difficult times in their lives. They have an opportunity with every interaction to leave the public having trust and confidence in the court system. And it takes all of us together. I view the National Center as the national leader to make sure that courts across the country have the tools and the assistance that they need to accomplish that goal. And I think that we have done a tremendous job for decades accomplishing that. And we have a lot of challenges and opportunities ahead of us with the changes in technology, with concerns over judicial security, and the recruiting of judges of attorneys to become judges. That we all need to work together to really stand firm and defend the rule of law and the importance of an independent judiciary.
I'd like to thank you, Justice Clement, for coming on Justice Speaks. It's been a delightful conversation.
Thank
and
you.
I look forward to spreading the word of your vision.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful spending time with you. I appreciate it very much.